What's up, hockey fans? Welcome to the Wraparound. As you can tell, I am not Emma Lingen. This is Michael Traikos. Pleased to be joined by Stephen Kerr and, as always, Michael Augello. Before we get started, the Wraparound is presented by Sticks.com. Why break the bank on sticks when you can get a pro-level composite hockey stick without the pro price tag at Sticks.com? That is STIX.com. Head over and gear up. And guys, we've got a jam-packed show, and we are in the dog days of August. I'm going to say September. I'm getting ahead of myself here, but still some news. We're going to be talking free agency. We're going to be talking some retirements and some off-season wheeling and dealing. To get us started, though, let's talk about the number one overall pick in this year's draft, Matthew Schaefer, who we are going to be asking the question. And Michael Augello, let's get us kicked off here. 17-year-old, first overall pick. He did fracture his collarbone last year at the World Juniors. Kind of a shortened season going into his draft year. What are the expectations? Do you expect to see him in an Islander jersey beyond the 9-game mark this year?
It seems as if the Islanders are going to give him every opportunity to make the team. But he is a 17-year-old going on 18-year-old in September, I think his birthday is, defenseman. And we know, in spite of defensemen being first overall picks, it takes them a little bit longer, unless they're extremely special, to develop. So I think they're going to give him the 9 games. I know he's been working in the offseason. I think it was with Scott Mayfield, the Islanders defenseman, sort of getting up to speed. And we know he's very talented, but he only played 17 games in the OHL last year, so he really didn't have a full year. He really didn't play that much at the World Junior. So if they play him 9 games and it's a little bit over his head, I could see him going back to Erie, because obviously he can't go to the American Hockey League.
Yeah, the last number one overall pick, who was a defenseman, was Owen Power, and obviously he went back to the University of Michigan in his draft year. I don't know if that was the right choice or not, but Power's on his way to becoming a franchise defenseman. Well, what do you think about this, Stephen? Do you expect Schaefer to be in the lineup for the entire year? And am I wrong? Because a couple days ago on the Big Show, I was talking about Schaefer being my pick for the Calder.
Oh, well, I like the fact that you stick your neck out, Michael. That's impressive. And, he obviously, Patrick Waugh has even said publicly that he's going to give him every opportunity to crack the lineup. I just think, the best thing for him is that he comes in gradually. A lot is obviously going to depend on how he looks in training camp. They've talked a lot about his maturity at 17, and you always think, well, he's 17, he's too young. Well, some of these kids, they're not too young. He's obviously handled a lot, both personally, as well as hockey-wise. So, well, I'm not going to stick my neck out like you are, Michael. I would say that, yes, he's going to get every opportunity, and he very well could make, at least a fleeting impression in the regular season, but I don't see him playing a full slate of games, no.
And we also have to factor in with Owen Power, as you mentioned, Michael. That was the COVID year. He was at Michigan. It was a shortened year. He went back to Michigan. The Sabres were all on board for it. He signed his entry level at the end of that year, burning off the first year of the contract. So he got more of the college experience. If you look back, a lot of these first pick overall defensemen going back a few years, it takes them time. And Lev Shunov was a second overall pick, and he wasn't ready to play in the National Hockey League. He played a little bit in the American Hockey League. So they'll give him every opportunity, but it's up in the air whether he can make it through the entire year.
Here's my prediction. He sticks for the majority of the first half of the season. Then he joins Team Canada, goes over to Minnesota for the World Juniors, and then he comes back to the Islanders. A little bit of both, a little bit of NHL and the junior experience.
That'd be a great scenario for him.
Yeah, could be. Another great scenario is, it's great to be a Tkachuk right now. Father Keith, sons Matthew and Brady all on the cover of the deluxe edition of the latest EA Sports NHL 26. Obviously, Matthew Tkachuk is, he's on the cover for all the editions, but here's another guy that it's hard to talk about Matthew Tkachuk without talking about injuries and what he is and what he isn't playing through. Sportsnet's Nick Kyprios states that Matthew Tkachuk could be out of the lineup through the Christmas break after suffering an adductor injury and a hernia in the playoffs. So what do we think about the Florida Panthers, who, they're in the spot last year? Tkachuk missed basically from the Four Nations onto game one of the playoffs with an injury. Didn't seem to hurt them. Does it matter if the Panthers are a top 3 team in the Atlantic, or is this a team that, forget about where they finish in the regular season? They are going to be just a handful when that playoff starts.
Well, they're loaded for bear. They're going to bring back most of the team that won the second Stanley Cup. You have to worry about Stanley Cup hangover, and obviously right now they're a little over $3 million over the cap, which would lead you to believe that Tkachuk is going to be placed on LTIR, because does that mean that they're going to trade Evan Rodriguez or somebody like that to conform to the cap? No, they're probably going to go at the beginning of the season into LTIR and then see what happens. And players always get injured, so you can massage the salary cap going forward. But I mean, they need Matthew Tkachuk completely 100%. I think in the second half of the year, and Team USA needs Matthew Tkachuk 100% if they have a chance to win Olympic gold in Milano Cortina. So I think it benefits him and it benefits them for him to be 100% healthy.
Yeah, I was going to say it definitely has, the benefit for Tkachuk missing the first part of the season is not only would he be hopefully fresh and available for the Panthers toward, the second half of the season in the playoffs, but also for the Olympics. Now, re-signing Brad Marchand and Sam Bennett and Aaron Ekblad, it certainly helps their cause that they can be without him. And of course, it's interesting how the Panthers have used the LTIR, to their advantage to be able to re-sign those 3 players, as well as, hopefully have Tkachuk down the stretch.
Yeah, it's interesting because, the Atlantic Division, I don't know how you guys feel about it, but for me, that's the hardest division in hockey right now. Obviously it's top loaded with the 2 Florida teams in Toronto. I don't think, with or without Tkachuk, I still think Florida's a top 3 team. But, those teams right below them, I mean, whether it's Ottawa, whether it's Montreal, sorry, Mike, I don't think Buffalo's going to be challenging for a playoff spot, but maybe Detroit will be. And that provides you with, 3 outstanding teams, and then 3 teams that, I think both wildcard seeds are coming out of the Atlantic. So, you can't take your foot completely off the gas if you're the Panthers and just say, okay, Tkachuk, come back whenever you can. But at the same time, that's such a deep team. Like it's an embarrassment of riches when you've got Matthew Tkachuk, Brad Marchand, Sam Bennett, Alexander Barkov, Carter Verhaeghe, Sam Reinhart. I'm probably leaving a lot of guys, not even mentioning them, but my point being that Florida team should be a top 3 team regardless. So we'll see what happens there. There's still some free agents available. There's still some restricted free agents that haven't signed. And a year ago at this time, we saw Dylan Holloway and Philip Broberg, both with the Edmonton Oilers, get offer sheeted by the St. Louis Blues, ended up accepting those offer sheets and, left Edmonton. This year, some of the names available: Marco Rossi, Mason McTavish, Luke Hughes, and Connor Zary among the 11 still unsigned restricted free agents as we're talking today. Stephen, let's start with you. Any chance we're going to see any of these guys offer sheeted in the same way we saw Broberg and Holloway a year ago?
Well, I believe it was about this time last year, like mid-August, that Holloway and Broberg signed with the Blues after the Oilers, didn't match the offer sheet. So I think a lot depend on, where a team is cap-wise. Broberg's contract was, 9.16 with a 4.58 AAV. And, it resulted in a second-round pick. And Holloway's deal was, I think a lot of it just depends on, where the teams are, cap-wise, where they would fit. I know everybody was all excited thinking, oh, a bunch of teams are suddenly going to jump in and start doing offer sheets, because of the success that Broberg and Holloway had. But, you have to remember from the business standpoint, where the team is. I think if a few more years go by and say one or two players, sign like they did and have great seasons or at least help in some way, you might start to see it eventually. But yeah, I mean, I think, certainly all of these guys are going to be signed, whether it's with their original team or somebody's going to suddenly jump in the fray at the last minute and give them an offer sheet. And, their original team says, no, we'll let you go.
Mike, if I'm Kevin Adams, what's stopping me from giving Mason McTavish an offer sheet? Because, he's exactly, I think, the guy that the Buffalo Sabres should be targeting. Am I wrong?
Well, they're looking at center up the middle with, Tage Thompson moving to the wing. They have Kulich. They have Josh Norris. I mean, they have Brian McLeod. If Josh Norris gets hurt, then they'll probably need a center, but they could move Thompson back up the middle. I think they need a scoring winger. Now, if you wanted to play McTavish on the wing, but the whole point here is McTavish is going to have to go to Buffalo. And does anybody want to go to Buffalo right now? I mean, the way that team has been, it's really a struggle. I mean, that's part of the whole situation with the Sabres is attracting players. And that's why, all these potential trades that they've been talking about over the last few months, or at least has been out there, the first thing that everybody looks at is whether they have a 10-team no trade or a no move, because that's always a factor. I look at that list and I don't think any of them will be signed to offer sheets. I'm sure an agent like Alan Walsh or somebody like that would put the C word out there, collusion. But I don't think it's that. I think it's the fact that the cap went up. And, this was a bad free agent or unrestricted free agent pool. And, there's a lot of money out there. But I think like a team like Anaheim, they're going to match any deal that Mason McTavish gets, because they have tons of cap space. And Marco Rossi, I think of the 11, he's the most likely of them to push the envelope in terms of signing an offer sheet or forcing Bill Guerin to make a trade because he just won't sign for what they're offering.
Yeah.
Yeah. With Rossi, I don't know if you think it's a money situation or you think it's an opportunity situation?
I think it's a little of both, because, he didn't play very much during the playoffs for them after playing a lot during the regular season. And you look at the trend of the NHL right now with bigger bodied forwards, and he's 5'10" and 175 pounds. And I think that a lot of teams out there are worried that those players are going to get worn down. And if the league keeps getting bigger, they're going to become, more of a minority in terms of being effective as a smaller player.
Right. Probably complicating matters. Like, why would you have to offer any of these guys an offer sheet when you could still go out and get a UFA? And Jack Roslovic, who scored 22 goals last year with the Carolina Hurricanes, is still available. I know there's rumors of him potentially going to Toronto. Toronto's probably got to clear some guys out, whether it's a David Kampf or a Calle Yarncrook or even a Nick Robertson, who was on that RFA list and recently signed for, I think, was it 1.5 mil or something like that? But Roslovic, what's the deal there, Steven? Is this guy holding out for a multi-year deal or the right location? Does he have to get a prove me deal to get to his next contract? What do you think's going on there?
Well, the fact that he's still out there, you would think he would have signed by now. He's certainly, at least, with the ones who are left, the UFAs are left, his name is at or near the top of the list. If you look at teams that could really use someone like him, I felt that, Vancouver, I think, has been also rumored as he might be a good fit. If you're talking about putting him at center, replacing Suter after he went to St. Louis, that might be a good fit. Toronto, that would be my thing, is they'd have to clear some guys out. But I think at this point, he's probably better off doing a 1-year prove it deal and then basically bet on himself, like so many players do in sports these days. I almost wondered if I even did a story whether he might be a good fit for the Nashville Predators, because they have some depth needs at center, but there doesn't appear to be anything happening on that front as far as I know. But of course, he does have versatility. He can play the wing. I know you guys have talked about that on the Big Show recently. So yeah, I think at this point, he's probably holding out for a multi-year deal, but I'm almost thinking that a one-year prove-it deal is kind of where he's going to be at this point.
What do you think, Mike?
Well, there's been some speculation connected with Toronto about, Roslovic played with Austin Matthews in the U.S. National Development Program. He would fit in nicely, right shot on the right wing, and the Leafs obviously would like him as a natural center and his playmaking ability to fit on that right side. If not, the fallback might be Max Domi playing on the right wing. But I mean, I look at this situation and I'm thinking Toronto probably is the leading candidate, but I would think if Roslovic is looking for a multi-year deal, that would mean that Brad Treliving has got to find a home for David Kampf, who's got 2 years left at $2.1 million. I mean, if he's clearing out Nick Robertson, who's making just under 2, or Yarncroke, who's making just over 2 on one-year deals, that doesn't clear it if you need to sign Roslovic on a 2-year deal. So if it is Toronto, I think, and maybe Roslovic is waiting around for Toronto to clear that cap space. Maybe he wants to play with Matthews, and maybe he's just being patient and knows that he's got a destination there, but he has to wait for Treliving to find a home for some of those contracts.
That's sort of what I'm thinking, because he's too good of a player not to get snatched up by now. I know, the longer you wait, the better the chances that you can go bargain hunting and you can get him at a lesser value. But it does feel like he's got a team in mind, or maybe a couple teams in mind, and now he's just waiting for those pieces to get cleared out before he signs. The question is, like, and Mike, you raised a good point. What's the interest level for a David Kampf? Like, if it's Toronto having to get rid of the Kampf for a Yarncrook, are there any takers right now?
Well, Kyle Dubas out there, he's the one who brought him from Chicago. I thought there was a possibility of him going to New Jersey because Sheldon Keefe used him as a third-line center and a penalty killer. But and I still
like the only coach that's really like Kampf, because Berube doesn't like him. No, it doesn't seem like he does.
Well, it'd certainly be a good deal for him to be in a team where he would be an ideal fit for a long period of time. And if the Maple Leafs are that team, then it explains why he would be waiting it out.
Yeah, it makes sense. I'm surprised Columbus doesn't want to bring him back. He's a Columbus kid, and he had a number of years already there. We mentioned Vancouver as a potential destination for Roslovic. Obviously, they signed Vitali Kravtsov to a one-year, two-way contract. The 25-year-old who was a top 10 pick of the Rangers. He's returning to the NHL after a 27-goal season in the KHL. What do we expect out of him this year? Like the Canucks were, I thought they actually had a really good offseason when you look at it. Getting in, bringing in Evander Kane, being able to re-sign Demko and Besser, a bit surprising. And now they got a new head coach in Adam Foote. Can Kravtsov be sort of that diamond in the rough for them?
Well, I think it's a low-risk deal, certainly for Vancouver. He could be. You always wish for success stories with guys like this. His first time around, in the NHL didn't go quite so well, but he certainly did well in the KHL, getting his team to the finals. And so, I'm certainly cheering for them, but you've got a lot of depth there with Vancouver. And, he's, of course, didn't live up to the billing, being the 9th overall pick in 2018. But now he's getting another shot. So I don't know that he'll have a breakout season, but you're certainly hoping that he can, at the very least, give the Canucks some depth on the wing.
Yeah, sometimes it takes, I was going to say, sometimes it takes these, you got to remember, there's a culture shock coming over from Russia to the NHL. And it like to Stephen's point, it doesn't always work out immediately. He's only 25. He's coming into, back to the NHL after, having a successful year in the KHL. So maybe it's one of those, he's now more better suited for the NHL, and he knows what to expect. But yeah, any thoughts there, Mike?
Yeah, I mean, 27 goals in the KHL, sometimes that doesn't equate to more than 10 or 12 in the NHL. That sometimes you'll see, players who will, come over and have more success. I mean, if you look at like Maxim Sipilkov with the Islanders, he had a big year. I think it was over 30 goals in the KHL, and he scored 35 points. And they liked him, and then they re-signed him. And I think the Canucks are looking at this, and it's a free roll of the dice. They signed him to a 2-year deal, or two-way deal, excuse me, league minimum. If it doesn't work, he goes down to the AHL, and if it does work, then he plays maybe bottom 6 minutes, and if he plays well, then he could move up in the lineup. So I think it's sort of a free swing for them.
Yeah. All right. So this has been an ongoing story. Obviously, the NCAA continues to, poach, sign top level players coming out of major junior hockey in Canada. The latest, Roger McQueen, who went 10th overall to the Anaheim Ducks at this year's draft. Last year, spent the year in Brandon, only played 17 games because of a back injury. So he's going to Providence College. The benefits of going to the NCAA have always been that it's a shorter schedule. You're basically in the weight room for most of the week, and then you play on the weekends. Is that the right approach for a guy like Roger McQueen, who, might need to get, a little stronger and continue to rehab after missing that year, or, is playing more games the better approach? Well, how do you see this one working out, Mike?
I'm surprised he's not going to Disneyland University after what happened after the draft.
That's right. They took him right there, right? And
yeah.
they had him next to what is it? The Lightning McQueen car?
Yeah, and Mickey and Minnie. But I think for McQueen, it makes a lot more sense than some of the other players. A lot of the players, and I'm not guilting them or anything, but they saw the opportunity to make NIL money going to Michigan State or Penn State or whatever. With McQueen, I think it's partially, yes, the lighter schedule and the ability to sort of build himself up. There was a lot of skepticism at the draft combine about his ability to stay healthy, and I mean, you looked at Caden Lindstrom the year before, and he had back issues, and he missed most of the year in the WHL, and now he's gone to the NCAA. So I think it makes sense for McQueen to go to Providence, a good school, and play a lighter schedule and build himself up, and then maybe the following year he signs with Anaheim.
Yeah, I agree with Mike. I think it will definitely benefit McQueen. While he could use more game experience, I think the lighter schedule can only help, with back issues. They're always tricky, especially, the biggest concern for me about McQueen is the physical type of player that he is. And you never know how back injuries are going to come out. So I know, he has so much upside. I mean, that's why he went so high, despite the injury situation. He definitely has some upside. What I think he could work on by going to the NCAA is perhaps to round out his game a bit more offensively, improve his skating, improve in other areas. Perhaps that's something he can work on at Providence. And then obviously if he becomes fully healthy and he's ready to go, that can only help him in trying to get to the NHL and do well there.
Mike, do you remember him from the combine? Did he participate in any of the events?
I do remember talking to him. I don't believe he participated fully. I think there were some things that he did, but obviously, and he said he was 100%, but I do think he was limited in some aspects, and that might have affected. I mean, there were a lot of scouts and a lot of people there that were saying, okay, there's some questions here. And like I said, based on Lindstrom from the year before and what happened with him, even though it wasn't the same injury, it was understandable that some teams would be running for the hills with a guy who had an injury as significant as a back injury that he had, and why his stock fell a little bit.
No, it's interesting. All right, we say goodbye to Anton Khudobin, former goaltender with the Dallas Stars, amongst other teams. Spent 14 years in the NHL. Really, his big breakout season, and the season of note is, during bubble hockey in 2020, when he took the Dallas Stars all the way to the Stanley Cup final. Unfortunately, they lost to the Tampa Bay Lightning. Stephen, let's start with you. You're in Texas. You must have remembered the Khudobin era fondly. What's your memories of?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it's funny though. His name, he could be one of the more underrated goaltenders in the league. But the thing is, his name didn't even come up on my radar until I read his retirement announcement. Based on just that 2020 final is what I definitely remember. Some of the saves he made in that series, I definitely remember, watching that and just his whole career. I think one of the reasons that you may not see his name on someone's radar as much, he's had some hard luck. Like I think it was in 2013-14 when he was with the Carolina Hurricanes. He went down with an ankle injury. And I think consistency is probably his biggest issue, especially when he had chances to be the starter. It seemed like he just kind of bowed under the strain eventually. He had to get pulled. He had some good games, and then he had some bad games, and he got pulled and just never came back. He was, certainly great in big moments, like the 2020 Stanley Cup final. He obviously overcame the size stigma that you see with a lot of goaltenders, but I think if you look back on his career, really the 2020 final and maybe a few other key moments are what stand out as much as any of the statistics that he had.
Yeah, definitely. When you look at Dallas goaltenders, you might not go down with, you might not have his jersey up there one day, like Jake Ottinger might have his jersey up there one day, but he went to the final, so. Good on Khudobin. What do you think there, Mike? Of the Anton Khudobin career coming to a close?
Well, he definitely had some peaks and definitely had some valleys. And, Jim Nill is not a general manager who made a lot of mistakes, but getting sort of guilted into signing Khudobin to a 3-year contract after going to the Stanley Cup final. And he had 2 really good years with the Stars going in, before that. But he really dropped off after that. And in the last couple of years, they buried him down with the Texas Stars. So he was in his mid-30s. So he hit the jackpot with that one great performance in the bubble. But overall, I mean, the guy played 14, 15 years in the NHL. You can't slag him for being a good goaltender.
Well, it also didn't help him with the Stars. I think there was a guy named Jake Ottinger that came along and kind of took the reins from that. So yeah, a lot of hard luck, with just better goaltenders that showed more consistency and and injuries and things like that.
Interesting. As most of our viewers are probably well aware, we are midway through our summer splash rankings, where we literally rank all 32 teams in terms of their off season and what they did, what they didn't do, what they were expected to do. Let's talk about 3 teams here before we sign off. Let's start with San Jose. San Jose, I don't know what you guys expected their offseason to look like, but it was fairly busy. Tell me how well they did, guys. They bring in Jeff Skinner. They bring in Ryan Reeves, Adam Gaudette, John Klingberg, Nick Leddy, Alex Nedeljkovic, and Dmitry Orlov. The one theme I'm noticing here are guys that were once NHL stars or really good players who are now well past their prime. For a young team like San Jose, Mike, was this the right moves in bringing these guys in?
Well, Mike Grier is following the Kyle Davidson blueprint from Chicago. It's like I'm an unrestricted free agent. Go ahead and sign me for a couple $1 million, because some of these players. I mean, Jeff Skinner had a terrible year in Edmonton. They gave him the same amount in San Jose. I think he'll be a better fit in San Jose because he'll actually play top 6 minutes there. But they really spent money on players who I think are, past their past due date, who they might be able to flip at the deadline. Some of them on 1-year deals, some of them on 2-year deals. But really, I don't know. And maybe the plan here is provide that young core group that they have some support with some veteran guys. But nobody thinks that they're going to make a challenge for a playoff spot. So I think they were just getting to the cap floor with some of these moves.
I
is Mike right here?
Yeah. I think Mike makes a good point as far as the fact that they're brief deals, and depending on what San Jose is doing by the time the trade deadline gets here. And as you said, I don't think maybe they could surprise everybody and somehow sneak into the playoffs, but they certainly were going for experience here.
Yeah.
And if nothing else, for whatever short time that they're here, they can give these young guys some confidence, kind of, mentor some of these players. And, I think that's really the value that they're going to provide. And by the time the trade deadline comes, I think you'll see certainly 1 or 2 of them are going to be flipped, for some more draft picks and younger talent.
Yeah, that's a good point. Is that this could just be a, come on the team, and then deadline comes around, and thanks, and we'll trade you for maybe a 2nd round pick or whatever. How about Philadelphia, guys? And let's start with Stephen here. Obviously, the big move is bringing in Trevor Zegras. They also got Christian Dvorak, goaltender Dan Vladar, and maybe even a bigger move behind the bench is going to be Rick Tocchet. The Flyers a couple years ago, Stephen, they almost snuck into the playoffs unexpectedly. Do they have the roster to maybe take that next step?
Yeah, I fully expect of the 3 teams that you briefly named here, I fully expect the Flyers can get in the playoffs this year. And just the fact that Tocchet is now the man guiding them, talk about it, a proven success and getting teams to the playoffs. Yeah, Rick Tocchet, I think, is really the key here. Obviously, you got to put the players around you to do it, and they've done so. But I was really excited about the Tocchet hire when I heard about it. So, yeah, I'd say the Flyers have really put themselves in a position to get in the playoffs. And once they're there, who knows what could happen?
Yeah, Mike.
I don't think they did enough. I don't think Dan Vladar is enough of an upgrade in goal. Fedotov is not a good goaltender. He may end up replacing Cal Peterson in Lehigh Valley. So you'll have Sam Urson and Vladar as your goaltending tandem, which is okay, but it's not great. I do think Tocchet will have an effect on some of the players. He's a good players coach. I mean, if he can get the most out of an enigmatic guy like Phil Kessel when he was an assistant coach in Pittsburgh, then he can do wonders with other players as well. I just don't know if they're strong enough up the middle. I mean, Zegras is risky. I mean, maybe it's a situation where a new opportunity and he can get back to where he was a few years ago when he was with Anaheim. But I think they're a year away, and I think they need some of their young prospects coming up through the organization to get to the NHL before they're a serious playoff contender.
I think they're going to be a fun team to watch, but I'm with you, Mike. I think they are just on the outside looking in. I'm excited to watch, though, Zegras and Michkov on a line together. It's going to be one guy, pulling a Michigan, and the other guy going, all right, I'll see your Michigan and I'll go between my legs or something. So it could be fun hockey, especially now that Torts isn't there. All right, let's talk about the Utah Mammoth. Maybe their biggest move this offseason was finally getting a name. So the Utah Hockey Club becomes the Mammoth. I guess, Mike, you can talk about them acquiring JJ Peterka in that trade. As well, they get Brandon Tanev and Nate Schmidt, fresh off winning a Stanley Cup. Is Utah, who's in a crowded Central Division, have they done enough to, put themselves into a wild card spot?
I think they're close. They'll need another good year out of Velmelka to challenge for a playoff spot. Nate Schmidt, I think, is a bottom pairing defenseman like he was with Florida. They're going to need, guys like Sergachev and Dursey to perform at a higher level. The Peterka trade, if he continues to build on the 68-point season that he had with Buffalo, he played top line in Buffalo. I don't know whether he's going to play top line with Utah. If he does, I think he can be an effective left winger on that top line and on the power play. But consistency and the ability to play defensively has always been an issue with JJ Peterka. So if he continues to build on what he had shown progress with in Buffalo, then he could be a really good forward. I think they're close. I just don't know whether it's a lock that they're going to make the playoffs.
Yeah, I don't think they did quite enough to get into the playoffs yet. I think they're moving forward. And first of all, I'm just glad that we don't have to say the Utah Hockey Club anymore, because somehow it just sounds incomplete when you don't have a team name. Now you can say they're the Mammoth. So yeah, they'll be fun, but I don't see them sneaking into the playoffs. The Central Division is just too tough, I think, with the teams above them.
I like the Hockey Club. I'm probably in the minority.
Oh,
yeah, I liked it.
It was growing on me. I have a thing about singular names. Maybe it's the writer in me. It's of it being the Mammoth and they did something. Now it did something. It just seems weird. But I guess the consensus amongst the two of you is it wasn't a Mammoth off season for Utah.
It was not a Mammoth season. But hey, all these soccer clubs are doing, like Austin FC and LAFC. It's like, let's do a name here, guys.
Yeah, you know what? It would have been different, if they just stayed with the Hockey Club. Obviously, I was a fan. I was hoping they were going to be the Yetis, but
I would have liked that name too. Yeah, I was with you on that.
Yeah. Listen, this was a mammoth show. We talked for nearly 40 minutes, guys. And before we head off, I again want to thank our sponsor, Stix.com. That's STIX.com. Be sure to head on over there and get a pro level composite stick without the pro level cost. For Michael Augello and Stephen Kerr, I'm Michael Traikos, and this was the Wraparound. We'll see you next week, folks. And Emma Lingen will be back.